history of American food. Before diving into the first real episode, I wanted to lay out how this is going to work and why. So pull up to your place at the table and let's dig in. During these plague times, our lockdown during 2020 and beyond, I dove into history podcasts to get me through the 3,000 plus masks I sewed. The history of Rome was the first, and I enjoyed it immensely. Then I continued with the Byzantines and then traveled over to Europe, peeking into legendary Africa, and kept up with the history of China and revolutions. I became a huge fan of the dress history channels on YouTube. I also spent a lot of time cooking, trying out new recipes and getting much better at cooking my favorites. This led me to consider how I, an American home cook, was cooking foods from so much of the world, both from the present and the past. I enjoyed the deep dives I was going on with Gastropod, and then I realized I really wanted to listen to a podcast on the history of American food, specifically United States of America food. How did we get where we are today? And there wasn't one. I also realized I have largely stopped reading books, sitting down with a book and reading words with my eyes. Between doom scrolling, audiobooks, podcasts, and YouTube, I was getting all my information in short snippets or by listening to it, which is fun, don't get me wrong. I hope people will listen to me, but it causes me to process and think about information differently. And I've always enjoyed the connections and realizations I would make when reading something complex or researching a topic thoroughly. So when I got a really enjoyable and thought-provoking book for my birthday, The Secret Life of Groceries by Benjamin Lohr, it got my thinking and making connection juices flowing again. And I figured if no one else is making the podcast I wanted to listen to, then I should. And I would definitely get to do lots and lots of reading. But first I needed books, and the kind of books I needed are not usually ebooks. Many are the older and the heavy kind, and for quite a while my local libraries were not open for corporeal books. So I got to spend some time figuring out how to tackle a subject as disjointed and sprawling as American food. First, I had to pick a starting point. With what limited research I could do with ebooks and, the giant sprawling modern search engine complex, I settled on the 17th century as the beginning. That is when the land that was to become the U.S. got all of the first pieces that still make up the warp threads that American food continues to be woven through. And these were: 1. Food and foodstuff production would be primarily an investment adventure. 2. American land and resources would be mined rather than cultivated. 3. America would be an exporter of commodities and an importer of fine and fancy things. 4. Links between your place in society and what you could or did eat were established. And 5. Attitudes toward food were linked to religious doctrine. Then how would I put together a coherent picture that doesn't become a chaotic mess? The food history of any nation is a complicated thing. For a nation as big as the U.S., it is even more complicated. And as a young country, we have lots of documentation. Lots. And the closer to the present we get, the more information and variety there is. When my local library system put in place their plan to give us access to paper books again, I could finally get all that information. So a huge thank you, then and now, to all librarians everywhere, figuring out solutions to let us back at our books, and continuing the long, often invisible, essential task of making the world of information accessible. Not just available, but accessible. The current situation is pretty different, and I really missed the chance to wander the stacks and just see what jumps out at me. But it's great to have books back. Not being able to library at all was a bit of a shock. Once I dove into that first haul of books, I could see that American food history is granular and regional and encompasses an enormous number of facets. Maybe this is why no one's done it before? But I had to figure out a through line. After some preliminary research, what stood out was that the growth and change of food technology and food opinions are what really gets at the heart of the American food landscape. The stories of how things like rice and chocolate and avocados appear, disappear, and reappear builds up to the present in a messy but comprehensible whole. The lives of the food that Americans have eaten explains where we have been and how we got to where we are now. American food may be more of a philosophy than it is a cuisine. The how and why of what is considered good food in America, or American food at all, it's all tangled up in economics, politics, and religion. I will mainly be covering food in categories: sugar, wheat, potatoes, beef, tomatoes, corn, rice, and so on. But things like iron, mercantilism, water, and religious doctrines will also be explored because they are inextricably linked to the decisions that were made about what would be generally available first to the British Atlantic colonies and later to the United States of America. Along the way, we will find out why most Americans buy their hot dogs pre-cooked, why rice has effectively come to America 3 separate times, and how the U.S. conception of food was shaped from the start by the worldviews of soldiers, sailors, and adventurers, but not by farmers. I'm excited and nervous about starting this journey of unknown length. There will be a few recipes, there will definitely be descriptions of food, and some pictures you can see. But mainly, it will be the story of food. I look forward to sharing what I learn along the way, and I hope you are hungry. If this sounds interesting to you, please join me for the first series, Iron. Thank you.